Greetings, greetings, greetings! Oh, welcome back. Pleasure to have you. I am CJ Hoffswright, the creator of Terrors in the Night, and we are on to episode 2, The Materials Needed, which should be pretty simple, so I will try to find a way to fluff up the video a little bit more for you. Make it worth your while. So, to begin, this is on to the material requirements for this tabletop experience. I've got some notes over here on my left-hand side, so I'm going to look over there, read them every now and then, as unprofessional as that is. Again, I make games, I don't make videos. I'm going to do my best. But I do have one thing I would like to do with any sort of videos I make. I would like for them to be done in one take. As I fail along the way, I'll just redo it from the very beginning, and hopefully as I'm able to communicate these ideas as consistently as possible without there being a bunch of cuts and breaks and stops and moving. I want this to flow, to go. So let's begin. The very first thing that all players are going to need is at least 5 decks of cards amongst a group of 5. So for yourself, you just need 1 deck of cards if you're not the game master. We'll get to you later. So I have some wonderful examples of cards that are perfect in some sort of ascending order. Here is a bit of my own collection. Dollar store. Very simple, often not terrible cards. Souvenir cards. These will most often have 3 at most of the signature cards. Signature cards, I apologize, are any sort of card that is not in play, excluding the jokers. So anything that has, any writing on it, without cards that you don't play with, those are signature cards. So most often, any sort of souvenir pack you have from a friend or a family member, that would be a perfect deck of cards to begin with. If you don't, and if you would like to start collecting some cards for this game or just for the future, because I truly believe every person should have a deck of cards on them at all times, whatever that is, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, Magic, everyone should have a deck of cards on them. So moving on to the most popular brand, the bicycles, and these are my favorite. I had absolutely no idea how good bicycle cards were until I started practicing with this game, using better flourishes to make myself a better game master for the game. My personal favorite bicycles are these hiddens. These really, really go well with the theme. They go really, really well with the court cards. Bicycle hiddens are my own personal recommendation of if you go out to a Walgreens, Walmart might carry them. I don't think so. I found mine through Barnes & Noble. And a couple through Walgreens as well. That's what I have in my region. Moving on from there, we have some more professional cards. These are Theory 11s. These are incredibly popular and very good. They often have a couple signature cards, and these are, if you want to be a little bit fancier, Theory 11s are not terrible. I enjoy them. I have a couple of my own, clearly. But at the very high end, there are very fancy cards, the limited editions, the ones with certain numbers on them. This is 736 of like 1,000 or so. At least that's what they say. Every deck of cards can be used to play this game, even decks of cards that are incomplete. That is one of the aspects I really, really chose to push for this game, is to have as much accessibility with the basics of it as possible. Moving up from there, as a game master, you are free, and even as players, you can bring chips, dice, your own game board, and coins in that order. So we'll begin first with the chips. So, poker chips. I found an entire bag, like a full bag, at my local Goodwill for about $3. It was wonderful. In that bag, I found 4 different colors. So I use the white ones as basic currency. As you're searching location, I will set these down on the game board prior to playing, and then I'd set the cards on top of these chips. If that card gets passed in the game, you get the chip. I opted to use these red ones as item tokens. If a player character wants to use an item, they have one of these red poker chips. If they found an item, I can also have these red poker chips on the table with the currency. Another thing that players can find in these adventures are treasures. Treasures will be anything that you can collect, and you could keep it. You can collect as many treasures as you want. You don't have to sell them, although their value technically in the game is not anything more than what they would be originally, because our treasured items are technically looted from the location. It's not very often that loot is referred to as looted. So that's in this world, treasures from these locations. However, there is a reason they're there, but there's also a reason that not many people want these things. And the final chip. This is the black one. These I only had like 3 or 4 of in that bag, so I made these my possessed item. I place this on the board. My players know where the item is in which that needs to be collected to move on with the game. Perfect. So that is the poker chips. Moving up from there are the dice. Oh, you can use any combination of dice. I have here just the regular 7 and a quarter. Really happy I have that. 7 dice. What do you do with these 7 dice in a game that only requires cards? You use these as additions for you, the game master, to have for your players. If your players bring dice and they want to play with the dice, you can basically come up with anything you want with these for the game. One of the things I came up with is if a certain player character has a spell book and they happen to draw 4 cards that are the same color, I said, okay, you can use your spell book to roll a d4 to clear a room. Most often in this game, rooms and hallways are cleared with 4 cards. So if the player character has the right circumstances, you can use a d4 to clear and not use any cards from their hand. I have a basic leveling. As you level up, you get new items, you get different things. I have different dice for the players to roll in order to see what experience they got as a level up. Dice, the layers. And lastly, we will move on to a coin. So everyone should at least have some sort of access to some kind of coin. This is the final fail state. If everything goes wrong with the player, and let's say they've lost all their health, they've taken the damage, they've taken the hit, and their character is about to be taken out of the game. The DM can decide, hey, heads or tails, one more try. It's kind of fun. So, moving on from there, we will have the game board, which I will be more than happy to show you in the next video, where we will go over an entire search step, a game step, and then the reward step. So, moving on from there, what else would the players need to bring? As a player, you will have a character sheet. This character sheet will not have any sort of stats on it. You do not roll for stats. This game is based around a pass or fail state. You either can or can't. You have the card or you don't have the card. I am not a fan of the minute and intricacies of larger games. I'm not a fan. It's just a personal thing to where there's so much information. There's so much happening that you have to have like radius eyes in your mind to be able to do damage in a certain way. That's not for me. I just want to know whether I passed or not. And that's it. As a player character, all you need is a deck of cards and your player sheet. You can bring chips, you can bring dice. I highly recommend bringing a snack or a age-appropriate beverage. And what would you as a player expect from the Game Master to also have prepared? The Game Master hopefully is the one who is in my position. The one with several decks of cards, bags of dice, a big fat bag of poker chips, coins. The Game Master is the one who will have, if they really want, all the materials to be able to provide for the players to play the game. Oh, what will the Game Master have prepared? They will have an adventure prepared. This adventure it's a weekly format, but it's only 5 days. We're only going to work 5 days a week, but we're going to work day, night, day, night, day, night, day, night, day, night, in that pattern. The player characters will vote at the start of their work week. Are they going to work day, day, night, night, day? 5 in that pattern, or however they choose. They could work 5 days in a row. They could work 5 nights in a row. That's an adventure. Inside of that adventure, there will be certain things within the open world of Terrors in the Night where the characters can go to shops, go to daytime active locations. They're welcome to basically do anything that can happen in the daytime. So why would player characters want to do anything in the night? Well, the night will offer completely unlimited time to do a search of a massive location. Nights are going to be for the big searches, the big buildings, the ones that are going to have several different spirits inhabiting them. So it's a bit of a time management game, and a campaign will consist of 3 adventures, 3 weeks. That will be a campaign, which should be about 30 minutes to however long. Playing this game by myself, I have gotten the time down to just barely 30 minutes, almost on the dot with playing by myself with 1 or 2 other imaginary players. I've gotten it to be about 30 minutes. I found it to be a really, really fun game to wind down from. If you have a group of friends and you are often playing board games, there's usually that one that is the wind down, the one that like people play to kind of, some of these games are not meant, but they take a great deal of your energy just to participate. That will be not this game. This should be far more focused towards telling a story, having fun, and mostly for any sort of game master or any sort of players to really role play, to really get into the character they've created. Let's move on! Oh, wonderful. So, moving on, what else would you need? You can have a pen and paper if you want, but it's not really needed. The only thing you would want a pen and paper for would be for the items that you carry, the ones that you use, and keeping track of your inventory. The way health works in this game is by drawing heart cards. In order to have health through your search, you will have a slot of 1, 2 to 3 of the heart cards you draw from your own deck. That is your health. You happen to go in a room at the very start of a search and you fail the first card before you've even drawn a heart. I'm sorry. That's that's a bad day. That's a bad night for you. And it's up to the game master to decide if you need to roll some dice or flip a coin. It's pretty fun. So, moving on from there, I think that is just about all the information that you're going to need for at least the first couple steps of beginning into this game. And I would like to give you a little bit more time with myself. So, I am CJ Hoffswright, and I've got a list here of all these things that have influenced myself in some way or another involving this game. This is not a comprehensive list of all the things that I'm a fan of. This is very, very minute. So we'll begin with card games. My favorite card game is Blackjack. Anytime. And Yu-Gi-Oh! I am a massive Yu-Gi-Oh! Nerd. I love it. I love the game. And I mostly love the game because when I was a kid playing Yu-Gi-Oh! In one of my packs, I got relinquished. And I never got the ritual card to use him. So I've recently picked up Yu-Gi-Oh! Within, I believe, this past year, just to get my feet back into the waters, and someday I will own Relinquished again. Moving on from there, I'd like to tell you about some video games I personally have drawn from for this game. And of course, this is a horror, and I'm a youngish man. We'll start with Resident Evil. Resident Evil is incredibly important to who I am as a person, because those Resident Evil and Silent Hill, those are the games that I would sit with my dad as a child and play with my dad and his friends as we grew up. So I have these deep-seated early memories of the PlayStation 1, Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3. Just, it's been a part of my life as much as virtually anything else. So I wanted to start there and move on to my own. The first horror game that I played, that I experienced on my own, that was Dead Space. Dead Space is incredibly fun. I love it. And if you own it on Steam and you have decided to fix any of the bug issues with the aiming, you're weak, take that off, play the game without that. I know it's tough, but it's fun. It's incredibly fun. I love the delayed, that something with Dead Space when I played it on Steam. And that delay, there was something about that delay that made me feel as though I was playing Isaac and not playing as Isaac, if that makes more sense. I was reacting to the horror in a way that was far detached. And that honestly made the experience far more fun for me. And I absolutely loved it. It was great. And then for some more video games, I'll throw a couple out there that are not horror related, but have absolutely influenced me. The first one is Frostpunk. I think I have just over 100 hours into Frostpunk, and I've beaten one campaign. I've just beaten the standard, make it to the end of the new home. That's it. I think I beat that on normal. So why have I put in so many hours into a game to where I basically do the same thing over and over and over? That's it. I get to do the same thing over and over and over, and I can play the game. I can enjoy Frostpunk, not in the same way I can enjoy Stardew. With Stardew, there's so many other things. You've got this to worry about, that to worry about, this and that. Even though you don't have to, I want to experience the game. I want to experience what you're trying to offer. And if there's so much there that I'm just going from one to the other, to the other, to the other, to the other. That's just my daily life. That's not something that makes me want to play it in my own free time. But what is something that I would play in my own free time is Payday 2. Payday 2 and the first Payday are... I think Crash Bandicoot 2 was my first ever video game. But Payday was the first ever video game I bought on my own. I loved the first Payday. My brother and I, we would play it all the time. And I got Payday 2, and that was just a joy, an absolute joy. Never stealth, always loud. Get that stoic perk set, and you're good, man. You can play Payday 2 on any difficulty until your heart is content. And that probably is my favorite video game. My favorite video game is probably Payday 2. So hopefully that says less about me than I think. Moving on. Movies. This is something that is incredibly controversial. There was a point in time where I had a collection of about 500 DVDs. I was a huge movie guy. I wrote scripts. I broke down into the editing and the filming and all that. My collection is now down to just 100. Most of them are DVDs. Some of them are Blu-ray. And I have a couple anime collections. I fell out of love with movies very recently. Within these past couple of years, I just can't experience movies the way I used to. And it sucks. It hurts. I used to be able to sit down and turn on a movie, and like an hour and 20 minutes of my day would just be gone. I would be happy. But as I get older, I feel I just don't have that energy to not have energy to do that. But I do have a few that are my favorite. There's some that I will hopefully sit and watch. That one is Scream. Scream was a movie that, come on. I mean, Scream, if you can't watch Scream, that's a personal problem. For me, that's one of the few movies, one of the only, probably one of the 3 that are on my list. The other one's Jurassic Park, and the other one is a movie from the 1960s called Ma Barker's Killing Brood. Please check out that. It is absolutely wonderful. I know it's on YouTube. I have found it on YouTube. I have found it before YouTube, but I'm so glad I found it on YouTube, because that is one movie I've seen maybe over a dozen times. Ma Barker's Killer Brood from the 1960s is, if you watch it, you will be astounded. You will be blown away at just how dark and graphic that old black and white movie is. It is wonderful. The very end has an old lady racking a Tommy gun, walking out and going down with the cops. Like, that's like that Payday going down with the do something big, and you get punished for it. But those are my favorite stories. Those are my favorite stories to experience. I'm not very good at telling those stories, but those are my favorite stories to experience. The heist, the big crime, the ones that are like the end all be all kind of capers. I love those. Those are my absolute favorite. Moving on, TV. TV's influenced me quite a bit, but not nearly as much as I had anticipated for this project. There were actually no TV shows that I feel like I drew from besides Ghost Adventures and Ghost Hunters, and my personal favorite, America's Most Haunted from the Travel Channel. That is a nostalgia kick up the ass, man. Man, that if I ever go onto Amazon and I throw up, because I've bought them all, I throw that on, man, it takes me right back to just being a kid. It takes me right back to being a kid, and I think beginning to fall in love with ghost stories. But those are very obvious out there. So I would like to give a shout out to 3 shows that I love very much, that I did watch growing up, and somehow I own 2 of these and not 1, and I would love to get the other one. The 2 I own are Scrubs. I own 8 seasons of Scrubs. And the first 3 are my absolute favorite. I love the first 3 seasons. They are great. Next, I own all of the TV show Stoked. Stoked was a cartoon from Cartoon Network I caught on TV maybe once or twice. Once or twice, I barely saw this show, but I loved it. Years later, I happened to have gone into a Hastings and I found a copy. Like like a $2 copy of the entire series of Stoked, like 16 episodes. It's great. I've watched that a bunch. I've watched it a bunch. It's such a good show. And the other one is in that exact same vein. It's 16. Like something about those Canadian programs, 16, Total Drama Island, Stoked. Something about those, they captured me. They really, really spoke to me in a way that was calm. As, you know, if I think about Total Drama, that really wasn't calm, but 16 and Stoked were very down to earth, very standard shows. There was nothing about them that really pushed the boundary, pushed the limit. They just were there, and I loved them. Moving on to, of course, I have to mention, I do watch anime. A little bit. I've dove into, you know, My Heroes and the Narutos. I grew up hating anime. I hated the people who liked anime, and I hated the people who loved anime even more than I hated the people who liked anime. I regret that emotion. I regret that as a high schooler, I saw the Naruto kids and thought of them as the losers and not myself. And so I corrected myself and I dove in head first. And my very first anime, my introduction to breaking out of hating anime and hating, like for me, it was just gross. For me, all I knew was the lolly aspect of it. That's all I knew. From what I understood as anime as a high schooler was that this was creepy, weird, graphic content for the weirdos. Yeah, a lot of it is, but I've discovered so is a lot of our regular content. Everyone's content's pretty nasty now, so I will say that my introduction to, and this will roll into the next, it was Panty and Stocking. Panty and Stocking with Garter Belt was my first anime, and it wasn't just one I watched, it was one I bought. I bought it on Blu-ray because it was in an American art style. It was that smutty kind of grossness I was expecting. But when I watched it, I got through the every episode in one day. I was expecting just to start and end it. But no, I watched every episode and I loved it. I then moved on to Elfen Lied, which then kind of reaffirmed my fears. Still cool though. I mean, it's still cool. Then I broke into My Hero Academia, which I liked. It was fun. And from there, I watched as many series as I could. Most recently was Dorihido, The Lizard Man. The Lizard Man with Nikado. I love that. That was a great show. The villain in that show was that mushroom dude. He captured my spirit. Like that, the villain in that show was so interesting to me that it brought me back into anime, and now I'm on a bit of a hiatus. And the reason I got into that hiatus was this last year, I have gotten to, I want to say, well, at least over 500 hours of old-time radio. I dove in as much as I could into CBS Radio Mystery Theater, Suspense, Lights Out, The Shadow, and Johnny Dollar. Those were the most popular, I'd say, for like the mystery and crime of what was old-time radio. And that was for me. Once I discovered old-time radio, I knew that was the content that would be for me. That's my kind of thing. The thing that I could just turn on and listen to and just kind of have in the background while I go about my business. What about books? I'm not a big reader. I mean, I'm a big writer, but I'm not a big reader. I For some reason, in my head, when I look at a book, it looks like hours. You know what I mean? When I look at a big fat book, I don't see it as a challenge, like Les Mis. I don't see Les Mis as like, oh, I gotta read that as a challenge. No, I see it as hours and hours and hours of sitting and staring, which is kind of my problem with movies. But I will say, here is a spicy opinion. Just like I said, you can know a little bit more about myself with these like other 15 or so minutes. Spoilers are things that I don't believe. I do not believe a story can be spoiled for you. I, as a kid, even till now, I made a decision very young to read the last page or the last chapter of every book I ever got. I cared far more about the journey. The middle of the story was always what I was interested in. I didn't really care for the setup in the beginning, and then I just kind of wanted to know where it was all going by the end. And I wanted to see those puzzle pieces put together as quickly as possible. I don't know why I have that sort of near animosity towards literature, but it's not really animosity, but it's there. There's something there that kind of keeps me from reading as much as I should. But there is one, as I mentioned in the other video, I'll give this man a full shout out. If you are a fan of ghost stories, or if reading anything old is something you are absolutely into, the stories of M.R. James are wonderful. They are what I know to be traditional ghost stories. What I know about M.R. James is that I know a great deal, a couple documentaries back behind these eyeballs, but what I know personally is he told really good stories. He told really good horror stories that were grounded in some sort of reality before they affected the characters. One way or another, the characters in these stories instigated the haunting. They were like, the best example I could give would be Whistle and I Will Come to You, My Lad by M.R. James. That is a wonderful story. As far as I know, we see spirits as like ghosts, as people in sheets because of this story. I believe, if I'm correct, this story was released around the time of like 1901, in the early 1900s. In the early 1900s. This man basically established what we know. Ha! Close. What we know as ghost stories. And that just fascinates me. That was something I didn't know. I thought ghost stories were just something that people just inherently knew. I had no idea that there was like a beginning to it, which I absolutely loved. And now I'm going to actually grab my notebook here because we're going to move on to some big recommendations. These are YouTube channels, as far as I know, still active, who have influenced me in this exact past year, in 2021. These are nearly all channels I discovered last year while trying to do research for this game. And I want to start with the Dungeon Dudes. They are wonderful. They're great. They're great, gentlemen. I love them. They're fantastic. Their videos are consistent. They are concise. They are perfect ways of spending half an hour and learning a little bit more about Dungeons and Dragons. The Dungeon Dudes. Just give them a try. Even if you don't like Dungeons and Dragons, just check out the Dungeon Dudes. Moving on, G4. Specifically, Invitation to Party. I don't think that it is a coincidence that after the pandemic was a big explosion in tabletop games. I was working on this, of course, during the pandemic, but none of that was a... whatever the word is. none of that from happened before instigated this. This project is something I've been trying to work on ever since high school. Ever since high school, I've been trying to make something of value, worthwhile, and basically available to as many people as possible. When I discovered free print and play games, I discovered tabletop gaming, and I love ghosts. So I put it all together. But go check out G4. They're back. And there's not, if you know G4, you know G4. And if you don't know G4, you should know G4. Brutal Moose. That guy makes some good stuff. Go check out Brutal Moose. And if you do need any sort of long form content, I highly recommend checking out Moose 2, where he does playthroughs of video games like Pajama Sam, Freddy Fish, back to those old classics. And moving on from here, I would like to shout out Joel Haver. Wonderful sketch comedy. Team APS, they're the ones who helped me really kind of discover and move on from playing cards back to Yu-Gi-Oh! And kind of get my brain wrapped around that. XP to level 3, I'll do a shout out for you guys in the next video when we're on the floor for the game. Stitched Together Pictures with Andy, the maniacal cinephile. You do great work. I'm very proud of you. The Company Man. Just go check out his videos. He does great. The Craftsman, Steady Crafting. There is no T. The Craftsman, Steady Crafting. Check him out. He does great work. He's so cool. He's so wonderful. I love him. V, Victor, period, Birchwood. She does, she makes classic old clothes. She's wonderful. Like, I know how to sew. I learned more from her than I've done in all of my years. And of course, I got to shout out Let's Ask Shogo. He's a great gentleman. He seems to have a wonderful videos. They have a wonderful channel. I highly recommend checking him out. We are pushing nearly 40 minutes here, so I'm going to let you go. You guys have a great one.